It has just happened again. A new viral video has come out in which the US initiative More Perfect Union delivers a scathing attack on McKinsey and its wrongdoings. McKinsey is introduced as follows.
Today, we're talking about McKinsey, the shadowy and parasitic consulting firm at the heart of nearly every industry in America. McKinsey claims to operate on a no-policy policy, free from a driving ideology or bias. But we tracked their history and broke down their worldview, and it places the consulting industry as secret agents in the war on working people.
In her 15-minute rant on McKinsey, investigative journalist Gabriella Spielberg calls it out for about 10 and well-known scandals McKinsey allegedly has been involved. She then raises a couple of justified questions, such as:
so who are they? So what do consultants even do? And what about the army of young MBA grads ready to keep the consulting industry marching on for another 100 years? So what should we do about it?
However, many of the answers given do not satisfy, and I would like to rectify those and share my more differentiated perspective on them. I'm Jack and spent 5 years as a consultant and project manager with the world's leading management consulting firm, McKinsey Company. Nowadays, I serve as an independent management advisor, and on my UN Consulting YouTube channel, I offer high quality and fun advice on how to pursue successful business and consulting careers. I like to add that I'm a passionate management consultant, but I do not anymore have any ties with McKinsey and share my well-informed but private views. On my channel, I potentially even anger McKinsey, for instance by instructing job applicants to McKinsey on how to pass McKinsey's initial online assessment, its infamous McKinsey Solve game. I think when delivering such a scathing attack on any organization, it would be great if you introduced yourself and your goals somewhere in your video. Only after watching it I researched that the organization More Perfect Union is a non-profit education, advocacy and journalism organization with a mission to build power for the working class. We pair our reporting with activism to win policy fights that support families and the working class. Your agenda is honorable, at the same time it would be good conduct to transparently state it. I would also be very interested about the background of the journalist leading through this reportage, Gabriella Spielberg, who is not listed as a member of More Perfect Union and just features as the video's producer in the credits. In the reportage, Gabriella interviews exclusively two people, namely...
That was Mike Forsythe, a New York Times journalist and author of When McKinsey Comes to Town.
Mike Forsythe, I have read your book, which meticulously elaborates numerous wrongdoings of McKinsey on more than 300 pages. It is a book I commend to anybody who wants to learn how consulting ought not to be. The second person in this video on whose inputs Gabriella heavily draws on is...
This is Garrison Lovely, a former McKinsey employee turned whistleblower and journalist.
Garrison's insights are thought-provoking and interesting. I'd like to add though that Garrison's views have already contributed to Mike Forsythe's tell-all book on McKinsey, as Mike states on his Twitter account. Gabriella complains that
I'm entering the global headquarters of one of the most influential companies in the world. But you probably wouldn't know that because hiding in plain sight is kind of their thing.
But it seems no active management consultant or consulting industry supporter has been approached who is willing to debate the state of the union. And I want to tell you, they exist. Gabriella leads us through 10 cases of where McKinsey is blamed of wrongdoing or highly questionable action, such as...
In 2018, McKinsey was contracted with the nonprofit hospital Providence Medical to design a program to get more patients to pay their medical bills.
Providence Hospital is a tax-exempt hospital. They're required to provide free care to poor people. And they were looking for any way to cut costs, and they turned to McKinsey to find a way to convince poor people to pay bills, even if in many cases they actually were not required to pay those bills.
Wherever these cases are true, I concur. McKinsey, shame on you. This is disgusting. And I have no reason to doubt these allegations, since the cases presented in this reportage are not at all new. Most cases stem from Mike Forsythe's book published in 2022, and those cases were famously and hilariously rehashed by John Oliver in the McKinsey edition of Last Week Tonight, to which show I also responded with a reaction video. Now, these scandal cases are presented a third time. It is worth remembering them, and in my review video on Mike Forsythe's book When McKinsey Comes to Town, I go through several of them one by one in my McKinsey Hall of Shame, but given they are well known already, I now want to move beyond this. A huge question posed by these 10 plus cases, of course, is: can we extrapolate from them that McKinsey is a systematically evil organization? Let me assume that behind each of these scandal client initiatives there were 10 projects, so since 1951, starting with General Motors, there have been 100 projects such as these. I know there have been more, but for this exercise I want to simplify. Let us talk about the total number of projects McKinsey executes. In 2024, McKinsey has 45,000 employees worldwide, whereof roughly 30,000 might be consultants. I assume they are working 80% of their time on client projects and that each consulting project is delivered by 5 consultants. Furthermore, I assume one project has an average duration of 3 months, resulting in 4 projects per year per consulting team. Hence, this analysis tells us that in 2024, McKinsey is going to deliver roughly 20,000 projects in a single year. So no, I strongly believe that those 100 shameful projects are not representative of the 100,000s of projects that McKinsey has delivered already. I do not want to relativize McKinsey's wrongdoings, but among its 30,000 employees, I have met many idealistic colleagues who actually want to change the world to the better. Are there evil people in the organization? Certainly. I have even met a handful of people whose character I found questionable. In my experience, though, they present the great minority in the company. Let us address some of the questions Gabriella raises in her reportage, starting with:
No, but what do they actually do?
Put in a nutshell, consultants are hired for 3 reasons. First, they get called in when a company faces a special or unique challenge, maybe a new market entry or for an acquisition. Second, they get frequently hired to improve the efficiency of a plant or process, because while the client is the expert in their own plant, expert consultants can leverage their experience accumulated in many different plants. Third, and a less glamorous reason, it is easy to get rid of consultants once you don't need them anymore, which presents an advantage over hiring permanent staff. If you like to understand what consultants actually do, I break it further down here.
They've been called the single greatest legitimizer of mass layoffs of anyone, anywhere, at any time in modern history.
Hey, may I ask you? For what reasons do you think companies hire consultants? Honestly, I think consultants are completely useless. Wherever they go, the only thing they ever do is cutting costs, and then hundreds of employees get fired. Excuse me.
There is no equivalent McKinsey, for labor.
When it comes to labor, they've got one MO.
Layoffs.
If they're not laying people off, they're making other cuts and recommendations that totally hurt workers and consumers. This system is great for short-term profits and shareholders, but not so great if you care about jobs or safety.
Okay, the middle part was not from the reportage, but I like to respond to this twofold. First, most McKinsey clients indeed want to increase their profits, and it is a business matter of fact that you can either increase your revenues or reduce your costs to raise your profits. Just saying that during my 5 years at McKinsey, I've never driven a cost-cutting initiative, so there's way more that McKinsey does than just cutting costs. Furthermore, while some cost reduction efforts purely driven by greed may be unethical, there also are situations though in which companies need to reduce their cost just to remain competitive or respond to a sudden crisis and fight for survival. Second, as an economist, I partially share your critique of our economic system since it promotes myopic planning and short-term profit seeking. Back to this guy. I'd like to remind you though that McKinsey, like many other companies, is an actor within our market economy as it is structured today. When I did my PhD on the economics of climate change, McKinsey positively disrupted the academic world and policy debate with its very famous so-called McKinsey CO2 abatement curve. In one single but powerful PowerPoint slide, McKinsey managed to convince many stakeholders that many measures to cut CO2 emissions and halt global warming actually came at net negative cost. At the moment, in the Western economies, labor is a comparatively expensive cost factor due to taxes, social insurance and dismissal protection. Imagine a world where the US, China and Europe collectively decided to introduce a carbon tax and remove fossil fuel subsidies, which would incentivize companies and societies alike to cut CO2 emissions. I tell you that many McKinsey consultants would immediately be at the forefront of efforts to help companies optimize their energy consumption rather than labor cost. And just saying, if you like to support my work for more perfect consulting, please like and share this video and subscribe for further top quality business and consulting careers content.
They're like business class mercenaries. They'll fight for any and every side that will pay them, and sometimes even ones that don't. In 1997, the state of Illinois was trying to reduce welfare spending. They needed help, and McKinsey generously offered their services for free.
One of the tricks McKinsey does, they will often come in and do pro bono work. And this is often a way just to kind of get in the door.
Once their foot was in the door, they were called back by some of the same state officials 20 years later to help, this time with restructuring Medicaid. And this time it wouldn't be for free.
Wait, there were 20 years between McKinsey's pro bono work for the state of Illinois and getting hired for Medicaid? Don't you always say consultants are myopic and short-sighted? Only very few consultants stay with McKinsey for 20 years, and if that initial pro bono work had truly been motivated by an act of manipulation, then this shot would have gone far too long. Here is where I think the more perfect onion reportage goes too far. The main purpose of pro bono work is work for a good cause, and I feel personally offended by that section of the video. I myself have served on one pro bono project where about 10 years ago a McKinsey team tried to investigate the pathways along which plastics waste enters our oceans and establish how to incentivize people to collect and utilize plastics waste instead of tossing it into the environment. This photo features a McKinsey colleague and myself interviewing a Filipino family living on a junkyard, making its living from waste picking. That plastics project was one of the hardest ones of my McKinsey career, during which I was working day and night throughout 10 weeks and through weekends, only to get sick by the end of the project. Some of my project colleagues have continued their efforts to protect our oceans from the plastics crisis by founding and joining a consulting firm dedicated to promoting sustainability.
McKinsey escapes accountability in a way because they are behind the scenes. It's all about secrecy, with them. Our advice is to you and it's confidential. If you guys do great, wonderful, you take all the credit. If you screw up and things go bad, it's on you, it's not us.
I actually think this summary is accurate, and I am not being cynical here. It is a matter of fact that the client company or organization hires an external advisor for an outsider's perspective, so indeed responsibility of execution lies within the client organization. I do not think this is unusual. If you call an external expert for yourself, such as a doctor or a lawyer, the implementation of the advice given rests with you. And sometimes your advisor may indeed be very unhappy with the ways how you implement the advice given. Usually, it is the clients who demand confidentiality from McKinsey, since usually the client is not proud that it needs to rely on external expertise. And indeed, in the many projects at which McKinsey does a great job, the client usually takes all the credit for it. And McKinsey is fine with then not being in the spotlight.
So what should we do about it? Well, the DOJ is investigating their work on opioids criminally for the first time. And some politicians have even talked about banning McKinsey from federal contracts. But most of these problems aren't even unique to McKinsey. If we just banned one consulting firm from federal contracts, the others would likely just fill in the gaps.
The reality is there are companies called Bain and Boston Consulting Group and Blight and Accenture, and they are offering kind of the same product. And I don't think that the results would be that different.
Thank you for making this point. Indeed, McKinsey is the world's most famous, but by no means the only consulting firm. This will happen if you ban McKinsey is a significant source of evil in our world. Jack, you are a former McKinsey consultant yourself. Don't you think your outfit looks a bit ridiculous? And you, do you think your costume makes you look any better? Back to the book, which has been written by two top New York Times journalists. And if you like this video, please like, subscribe and share for further top quality business and consulting career advice. And McKinsey devil, go away! Oh no, an exorcist! McKinsey is gone. Now the world will become a better place.
And what about the army of young MBA grads ready to keep the consulting industry marching on for another 100 years?
I would tell them that, these organizations will promise you that you can do work that is exciting and prestigious and improves the world with smart people that pays well. You can have it all. And I would just tell them that that's not true. I think I'm really much happier than the cohort of people that I worked with at McKinsey.
Hey Garrison, I'd like to say I'm sad that you had a bad experience at McKinsey, and I'm happy that you feel happier now than during your time at McKinsey. However, do you truly believe you can compare your own happiness with that of your former McKinsey colleagues? Recalling my own experience of 5 working years at McKinsey, I do think that many of the promises made and you just listed actually were fulfilled and my expectations met. Of course, not all consulting myths are true, but many are. I have made a mini video series on consulting myths versus reality here. I have read your articles in The Nation and in Jacobin, Garrison, where you act as a whistleblower and give an account of your terrible 2 years at McKinsey. I recommend reading your articles to anybody watching this video and link them in the description below this video. To the army of young MBA graduates, quote, I'd like to point out there that you indeed work on projects that appear rather uncommon to me. Namely, you work with New York City's largest prison, as well as the US Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, when it was taken over from Obama by the Trump administration, when it was politically supercharged. I can imagine that must have been super hard by definition. You do not say much about your 3 banal projects in the private sector though, which I believe might reflect the common consulting experience more accurately. I also stumbled over your report saying that there was a heavy drinking culture in your McKinsey Philadelphia office. Well, there may be also some cultural differences here. I cannot recall any binge drinkers in the general McKinsey office. McKinsey consultants in Germany are generally more viewed as stiff party poopers who, however, scored very well at school. Anyway, to wrap up, I believe a significant chunk of the criticism of the consulting industry would deserve a response not just from me, but for instance, these guys. McKinsey, I know why you prefer to keep silence since your PR strategy is to wait things out. However, it would help if you got your hands dirtier and explained the benefits of our consulting work not just to your client companies, but the general public too. In these 2 videos, I go even deeper into the heavy criticisms of McKinsey. However, if you now feel ready for a laugh, enjoy this funniest consulting joke. Please like and subscribe and see you soon, Jack.